Take it away, John Nelson.
Someone sounding like Trent Reznor and Nine Inch Nails or the People's Court brings us into SDH's look at the USL Championship and our guest to break things down for one of the big stories this week in the USL Championship. The play-by-play voice for Louisville City, for Lou City. It is Jeff Greer, also host of Soccer City Radio, hanging out with John and Jason. It is J3 or 3J. I don't know how to make this broken down, but Jeff, thanks for hanging out with us here and turning it into 3Js as I look at the USL Championship kicks off here on Thursday.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys.
Okay, so, we can talk about the match, and we'll get into that in just a little bit with Atlanta United 2 and how things came out in opening weekend there at Lynn Family. But after the match, all of a sudden, the coach that you had on the touchline is no longer the coach on the touchline. And I guess the question is, what happened?
That's a great question, and I wish I had a better answer than it's still rather unclear. I know that there's a non-disclosure agreement, so a lot of people have been very tight-lipped about what actually transpired to lead to the actual parting of ways, and they made sure to term it that way, I'm sure, as part of the agreement for the as part of that NDA. All I can speak to is that there had been some speculation that there's a lot of different decision makers at Louisville City, and as with anything, it's going to run into situations where people might disagree on how things go. But it was like a sack of bricks. Just all of a sudden, it's like, oh, okay, so that happened after an entire preseason and the first match of the season. But yeah, I'm speaking truthfully. If I knew, I would tell you guys. I don't know what it was that transpired that led to the final decision. But I do know that they're pretty excited about Danny Cruz and the chance to kind of move forward and keep playing. I guess if that was going to happen, it was going to happen when they had a 2-week break between matches.
Yeah, I think it caught everybody by surprise who's followed USL Championship and Lou City and all the success. How much have you had a chance to talk before this, and I don't know if you've had a chance since, to talk to Danny Cruz and kind of get a sense of where he is and how ready he is for this job with a lot of pressure on it, because this is a team that's expected to be a success.
Well, we were actually supposed to talk to him tonight as part of our weekly Soccer City radio show. I think it's his first interview. So I can report back later and have a better answer later on tonight. But no, I mean, he's really widely respected. He knows the game really well. He obviously has been on staff. I'm sure it's a little uncomfortable for him with the way things went down, but he knows the players and knows, presumably, we'll get into it tonight, the way he wants to play. Louisville City is actually a team, I think, that's set up pretty well to play a variety of ways. They can play 3 at the back. They can play the pressing, the gegenpress sort of 4-3-3 that has become so popular. They can play, in fact, there were a couple of times on Saturday where it almost looked like they were in a 4-4-2 at times and sitting with those lower blocks once they had the lead later in the match to accommodate for some of the speed that Atlanta United 2 has with its younger guys. So I think they're a pretty versatile group, and to his credit, John Hackworth and his staff, and I know James O'Connor in the front office, they worked really hard to get guys in who can play multiple positions and fill different roles throughout the field. So I would think that that Danny will have a lot of different tools at his disposal and would be able to kind of shapeshift if needed or continue to play the way that obviously has been so successful for Louisville City over the past few years.
And it's a veteran side. For those that haven't had the chance to look at Lou City and see that these are a bunch of veterans that know what they're chasing after every year. It was a slow start last year, getting to a conference final. And I think that one of the big marquee names that attracts folks to looking at Lou City is having a guy like Cameron Lancaster up top that really is one of the most prolific scorers in league history, really.
Yeah, and the crazy thing is he wasn't all that connected on Saturday. I mean, he played well because he's Cameron Lancaster, and he typically will at least insert himself in some situation and uncork something from 25 yards or something like that. I mean, he's got such a crazy nose for goal, and those half spaces, you really have to close him down immediately whenever he's within 30 yards of goal. And he pulled that one shot. I think it was like 25 yards out, and it wasn't. It was close enough that you're like, okay, yeah, that he's still there. But it speaks to Louisville City's quality that they're able to pump out a couple of goals and keep working for them after an hour. With Cameron Lancaster being relatively quiet. But it is interesting the way they used him at times last year, because there was a stretch where he wasn't getting as involved as they want him to be, and obviously he's going to be the focal point for all attacking purposes for the whole season, any season on whatever team he's on, and they would bring him a little bit deeper. And again, I'm not comparing him to Harry Kane, but similar to how Tottenham started to pull Harry Kane a little bit deeper so they could at least get the ball at his feet. And use his passing ability, because Cameron Lancaster is a pretty good passer. And when you have guys like Napo Masoso and Antoine Openo, Niall McCabe isn't as fast as he used to be, but can still make runs. And certainly Brian Ownby when he's available. They've got a lot of options who can run off of him. So I'd be interested to see if they try to bring him a little bit deeper after this past weekend where he wasn't really able to get too involved. And to their credit, Atlanta United too really dealt with the high press pretty well early on, and that's usually where, if you can get a couple of turnovers, you can get Cam Lancaster on the ball quickly and get him kind of revved up. So, but he's really a key player for them, obviously, and they're going to keep finding ways to get him involved.
Our Atlanta audience is asking a couple questions about what did you think of Atlanta United 2 in that first match, and were there any players that stood out to you that you were surprised by?
Well, I know that the late goal was scored down that left flank or defensively the right side, but I had actually seen Aiden McFadden as a college player at Notre Dame, and I thought he played pretty well for a guy who's kind of thrown into the fire. So I think he'll be a nice player. Certainly all of the teenagers, super quick, lots of energy. I thought they were all of the young, really super young guys stood out to me as guys who have some quickness to them. Caleb Wiley looked pretty good as another fullback. But again, as you guys mentioned, it is such a veteran Louisville City squad that they can sprinkle in a teenager or two like Jonathan Gomez, and Akil Watts isn't a teenager anymore, but he's a really young guy still, and basically have the maturity and the shape and the quality to work around those guys and let them kind of capture their flair. And I know Atlanta United is mixing in a lot of really young guys, but I also really like the whole front three. I mean, I thought that they were annoying in a way that they wanted to be annoying, and were able to kind of force Chris Hubbard to distribute a little bit cleaner. That was a real problem for Louisville City last year with Ben Lunt, especially early in the season. They had a really hard time against teams that pressed high. So I was impressed with the youngsters that Atlanta United had, and I would think that they're going to be a team that, I don't know. It's so hard with some of these second teams, so to speak, with all these young guys. You just don't know. The results are probably always going to be uneven unless they just perfectly capture the zeitgeist of a season. And I just know that they're going to be really difficult for a lot of teams to deal with because of those fresh legs, even with the short bench that I know they had on Saturday, which was atypical for any team going through the season.
Jeff Greer, play-by-play voice for Lou City and Soccer City Radio, hanging out with us here for another couple of minutes as we look at the USL Championship here on Soccer Down Here. Let me build it out a little bit for you. When you look at the division, because we know that it's the top four heading to the postseason, when you look at the division on the whole, what are you looking at from the other teams that are going to be chasing after those playoff spots and chasing after Lou City this year?
Yeah, I mean, Louisville City, the expectation is every year, it's not like And I know the divisions are a relatively different concept than what we're used to, but they don't just expect to make the playoffs. They don't expect to win a game in the playoffs. They expect to be in at least the Eastern Conference Final. And it has become – it's kind of funny because I'm in Louisville. I moved here 8 years ago. I've always been familiar with Kentucky basketball down the road in Lexington, but the expectations have become very similar. Kentucky basketball expects to be in the Final Four. Anything else is a disappointing season. And Louisville City is kind of like that. They expect to be in the Eastern Conference Final. You never know what can happen, like it did this past fall with the Rowdies coming to town and playing an excellent match and winning. But Louisville City expects that. They expect to be there. And I'll be interested to see what happens with Danny at the helm so early in the season. I think he can kind of get his feet under him. I don't know if he's interim the whole season. And I know you guys are dealing with a similar situation where you're not quite sure what the long-term situation might set up to be. But the talent is there. I would say the team that always intrigues me, and this is such a regional bias, but Indy 11 always, because of that rivalry, because they play each other 4 times. I know that Louisville City last year when they played St. Louis a couple more times, in Indy 11, they would switch to a 3-back system at times just to give them a little bit of a different look, and it worked. It worked. So I think Indy 11 is a really intriguing team to me. The team they play next, Birmingham Legion, is an interesting team as well. I know there's people who are concerned about that matchup early in the season. But Louisville City, guys, they have 7 of their first 9 games are at home. So if you're and you mentioned this earlier, the slow start, then they've had them. It's like every year for the past. I mean, seemingly every season they get off to a slow start and they kind of build to a crescendo and obviously storm into the playoffs and do wonderfully there. But this is a great opportunity to buck that trend and start the season strong, turn the stadium that they have, this brand new stadium. And I'm not just saying this because they pay me. The stadium is spectacular. I've been in a lot of stadiums, both here and in Europe, and it's one of the nicest I've been in. So they need to turn that into a true home field advantage for them and the fortress, so to speak, as we always hear people talk about. And they have that opportunity to do that with this division and with this start to the season with all the home games.
My last one, Jeff, being in the market, I think you have a better sense of this than anybody else. What are the next steps for the entire club? And we'll include the NWSL side of it as well. You know, what is next on the horizon for soccer in Louisville? It feels like this growth has just been amazing to watch. I lived in Lexington during my middle school years and a couple of years of high school. I went to Lafayette High School. And, you know, the soccer scene at that time long ago was pretty small. I didn't know how Louisville would go, but now it feels like one of the rising markets for soccer in the United States.
Okay, so so I grew up in New England, okay? I've spent time in D.C., I've spent time in South Florida for work. I went to school in Pittsburgh, and I know what soccer markets look like. I've been in South Florida. I've been especially in D.C. I mean, D.C. was like every bar was packed in 2010 when I was there for the World Cup, which was awesome. And we're talking like not necessarily Spain versus England, but, you know, the smaller countries playing each other, the bars were packed. Everybody was watching soccer. So it was really fun to be in a place like that. I had just moved to Louisville at the end of 2013 into 2014. And you're talking to a guy whose family spent a summer in England in 1998 during the famous or infamous David Beckham red card World Cup and the loss to Argentina. And so I was indoctrinated at a pretty young age into soccer and especially English soccer and European soccer. And I thought I was just this weirdo for the longest time because it was like me, my brother, and his best friend, and we were always trying to find these like questionable streams that probably inundated our computers with viruses trying to find games. And in 2014, I'm like, okay, is there going to be any bar in this city that might have a game on in the corner that I can just go sit at and drink and watch soccer all day? And I was blown away with how much interest there was. And that was about a year before the club had been fully established and started playing. And so they've really captured – Louisville has a big young population in the city proper. You might call it hipster, you might call it yuppie, whatever you want to call it. But there's a big population of that. And it kind of butts heads with the southernness of Louisville that comes out during Derby Week, which ironically is right now. Mm-hmm. And so it really captured the momentum of the young part of this population. And it has been hugely popular. I mean, for big matches, they're getting 10,000 plus at the old baseball stadium where the sightlines were horrible. And now they've got this incredible architecture. So I think again, I know they pay me, but I also am being serious and can objectively say it sure seems like racing has really tapped a new nerve with young families, with women in this community. It's absolutely awesome watching them unfurl the banners and everything at these matches. And then Louisville City has this established credibility here as a winner and a fun team to watch over the years. So the combination of those two, you're starting to hear the Women's Cup is coming, PSG and Bayern on the women's side coming here in August. I mean, it's just like it's like a spaceship. It feels like, and we're on the rocket launch. So I know you guys can appreciate what it's like when a community captures soccer the way Atlanta has, and Louisville feels like a smaller market that has kind of done the same thing. And then once we get that full capacity stadium allowed to be full to the 15,000, I guarantee you we're going to hit that a few times with some big matches this summer and in the fall.
So then last question on the board comes from our Twitch pitch, and our listeners and viewers want to know, okay, so then who is your favorite team from Europe or England? Who's your team that you follow?
So, okay, in the late 90s, I became really good friends that one summer with this kid, Nathan, who we've stayed friends all these years, and he was Manchester United. And my brother and I kind of went back and forth on, like, do we want to support Nathan or do we want to kind of butt heads with him? And I picked Leeds. And at the time they were, regularly top 4, top 5. They were in the Champions League. They had the magical run to the semifinals. They lost to guys Mendieta and Valencia in the semifinals, which was heartbreaking for me in high school. And that's where a lot of the questionable streams come in, because Leeds then fell off the face of the map for like 20 years. And I had to figure out a lot of times how to get matches on my TV or computer, and it was quite the challenge at times. But I've stuck with them through and through, and I feel like so many other people have been rewarded with getting Marcelo Bielsa in charge the last couple of years and watching that club completely on the upswing now. So that has been my team for 20 plus years, and I'm happy to say that I was in on the original wave at least in the 90s, and then back with them again. I know the 70s and the older teams were also really good, but I was not alive. So, but yeah, my favorite players are always like Lee Boyer. I always loved Ian Hart. Harry Kuehl was so fun to watch. So I always have a special spot for them, and that's the team that I'm happy to still be sticking with, as they're having a great season this year.
All right, time for the plug. For those that want to listen to you call the matches for Lou City, that want to catch up with you on Soccer City Radio, anything having to do with Jeff Greer, how do they do it?
Well, you can follow me on Twitter at Jeff Greer, Greer. Typically, we'll tweet out links and stuff before we get started on anything, so people can follow it there. And then your best bet is just ESPNLouisville.com. We've got all the Soccer City Radio shows both live on there streaming from 6 to 7 on Thursday nights. And then also we have the podcast version for people if they want to listen to it later. And then any Louisville City game, if you want to listen to it on the radio, it's a totally different medium for listening to the sport, but it's fun, as you guys know. You can listen to those also on ESPNLouisville.com.
Jeff, as always, great to catch up with you. Great to get your perspective on what's happening in Lou City with Hackworth out, Danny in, the first match going on the board. Thanks for being a part of Soccer Down here in our USL Championship weekly segment. We'll catch up with you soon, my friend.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, guys. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks, Jeff.
And we'll get to catch up with him about Leeds and how things continue to progress there as well as the season goes. Leeds guy, you got to like that too.
Got to like that. You've got some other coaching drama in the USL Championship. Louisville's not cornering the market on this. The Oakland Roots haven't played a game in the USL Championship yet. They've got a new coach in place. It's the old coach back in place, and we'll see what happens with Oakland. The situation there's a little bit harder to figure out. Dario Pot was named the coach going into the preseason late last year when Jordan Farrell became the technical director, leaving the touchline. Preseason, not so great. 5-1 loss to Sacramento, lost to Tacoma, lost to Las Vegas. They lost 3-2 to San Jose after having a 2-0 lead. It was announced earlier this week that Dario Pot's mutually parting ways with the club, and he was quoted in the press release. He said, "This has been a unique learning experience, which I'm thankful for. I wish all the staff and players an exciting and positive season and beyond. Thank you." But he didn't actually coach a game for the team in competition, and now it's back to Jordan Farrell, who's going to be the interim head coach. They look for a new head coach, and they start in 2 weeks.
And they are listed in 20th of the 31 USL Championship sides in the power rankings that have come out for the first time. No real surprises when it comes to the folks at the top of the power rankings from the USL Championship. You know, you look at the top five, it's Tampa, and they've got Charlotte this weekend. You know, we caught up with Connor Antley last week and got his perspectives on what it's going to be like for Tampa to have the first couple of matches in their season at home to build up points there. You've got Phoenix coming out of the West there at number 2. El Paso, as they made their big run last year, they're at number 3. Lou City, they're at number 4 with a win under their belt. Obviously, the gap time between now and their next match will help, integrate things, but they got off to a great start with the win against Atlanta United too. And the number 5 is San Antonio when it comes to the power rankings. They've got Colorado Springs this week. And Colorado Springs last week, they got to break in their new downtown stadium for one of their preseason matches. And so it's going to be a great season for Colorado Springs as well with their new downtown venue. And it's gotten a lot of rave reviews out of the blocks.
Yeah, I was a little surprised to see San Diego at 10th in the power rankings. They haven't played yet. They have the big opener on Friday night where they go to Phoenix. That game will be interesting. Some of the people who were involved in the incident last year where San Diego walked off the field are not with Phoenix anymore. The player involved is actually in Birmingham. Right. All that was resolved in actually a really surprisingly smooth way in some ways. And it felt like an opportunity, but I wonder if that kind of unfinished business role carries over here because San Diego didn't get to finish that match. And I thought they were really impressive last season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The preseason has been good for them. Let's see how they look. 10th felt low for me. Mm-hmm. FC Tulsa at 7 after their impressive win over OKC Energy. Okay, I can get that. Sacramento at 8. We'll see. Birmingham at 9 feels a little high. I've not been as high on the Birmingham Legion, but they have made the playoffs. They've been a solid, if not spectacular team. I think San Diego can jump them. I think Indy 11 can potentially jump them. And Indy and Birmingham play on Saturday. I think that's an important game for people to look at if you're following Atlanta United too, because that's a conference game or a division game. That one's at 7:30 on Saturday night in Birmingham. Tampa Bay plays Charlotte at 7:30 on Saturday night. Atlanta United 2, who we will have a twos review on Sunday for their trip to Oklahoma to face OKC Energy FC. It's an 8:30 Eastern time kick, so there is a little bit of overlap with the first team, but you can watch the first team in the game that starts at 7 o'clock against the New England Revolution, and then you can pick up after the game late in the first half for the twos out in Oklahoma. So we will have a twos review on Sunday, digging into that game a little bit deeper like we did last week, and that'll come after every game. Just sometimes it might be the next day, depending on our schedules.
Wrapping up the schedule for the weekend, couple of matches out west. Rio Grande Valley is they're going to have their season home opener against New Mexico United. A lot of folks are looking at New Mexico United as a possible contender out west. San Antonio, they get Colorado Springs. Sunday, there's one match on Sunday. The Miami FC gets to host Loudoun United, so we'll see what it looks like for the Miami FC and Loudoun, two teams that have obviously going at their approaches a little differently. But that's going to be your one match on Sunday in USL Championship, 7:30 Sunday night at Ricardo Silva. So that's a look at your schedule and your power rankings coming out of the blocks as the USL Championship season really starts to catch steam. Not everybody's on the board yet with their first match, but you're getting that rhythm of the season now where folks are getting into their schedules.
Yeah, it's going to start to ramp up as everybody gets active. I want to see what Oakland does next week with their newly installed former coach as the interim coach. I still would love to know what happened there. And maybe one day we'll hear what happened in Louisville. Yeah. It's a weird situation with two teams that a lot of people are looking at going into 2021 who have coaching changes either before they get started or after game one.
And your first game for Oakland is at Phoenix.
That's not easy.
Welcome to the 2021 season, Oakland Roots. It's the late game next Saturday night, May the 8th. So once again, that's going to be an interesting dynamic when it comes to Oakland getting their season underway with their coach, who was their coach 13 days before your season opener, is no longer your coach. So that is a look at the USL Championship for this week here at SDH. Thanks to Jeff Greer, the play-by-play voice for Lou City, and the host of Soccer City Radio for hanging out with us. That's week one in the championship.